Most minds repeat the same internal phrases all day without noticing how much mental energy quietly leaks away. This repetition feels neutral because it happens beneath attention, yet it steadily narrows perception and slows inner clarity. Rather than thinking freely, the mind circles familiar wording, replaying doubts, assumptions, and unfinished judgments again and again. Nothing dramatic appears on the surface, so the loop remains unquestioned while background tension quietly accumulates. Over time, this silent cycling becomes the default mental state, shaping focused decisions and energy without any clear warning. Inside the mind, a narrow set of thoughts runs automatically, repeating itself without conscious permission or deliberate choice. Instead of responding to the present moment, the mind replays familiar wording already used hundreds of times before. These phrases are not loud, yet they occupy mental space, crowding out fresh observation and flexible thinking. The pattern feels efficient because the mind prefers reuse over creation, conserving effort while quietly limiting awareness. Each repetition reinforces the same mental pathway, making return easier and departure less likely with every silent cycle. What appears as thinking is often simple looping, where content moves but direction never actually changes. Because the loop lacks obvious conflict, it avoids scrutiny and continues operating beneath awareness without interruption. Over time, this pattern becomes the background noise of consciousness, subtly shaping perception, choices, and internal reactions. Eventually, the mind forgets alternatives exist and treats repetition as normal mental activity rather than a narrowing habit. Repetition persists because the mind treats familiar wording as safer than uncertainty and resists opening new mental territory. Once a phrase is recycled often enough, the brain tags it as reliable and returns automatically. Without awareness, this shortcut saves effort in the moment while quietly locking attention into narrow channels. Gradually, repetition becomes easier than silence, making the loop feel natural rather than constructed. Every return strengthens familiarity bias, causing the mind to favor known phrases over present signals. As this preference grows, novelty feels inefficient, so the loop repeats without resistance internally. While nothing forces the cycle forward, momentum builds through familiarity rather than conscious decision. Reuse rewards consistency over awareness, allowing repetition to continue unnoticed across long stretches of mental activity. Daily functioning shifts subtly as repetitive thinking consumes attention that would otherwise track surroundings and changing demands. Attention becomes divided not by events but by constant internal phrasing that competes with immediate perception. Focus feels thinner because mental bandwidth is already occupied replaying familiar wording in the background. Energy declines gradually since maintaining loops requires effort even when content appears calm or neutral. Mood flattens as mental freshness disappears, replaced by a sense of dull continuity across hours. Tasks take longer because the mind checks the loop repeatedly before engaging with what is directly present. Conversations lose sharpness since attention drifts inward toward repeated phrases instead of incoming information. Fatigue emerges without clear cause because the mind never fully rests from ongoing internal repetition. Because the process feels ordinary, its influence on clarity and stamina remains largely unnoticed throughout the day. Over extended periods, this looping quietly reshapes how the mind evaluates effort, meaning, and direction without drawing attention. As repetition dominates internal space, fewer new associations form, reducing mental flexibility and adaptive response. The mind begins mistaking familiarity for truth, reinforcing assumptions that were never examined closely. Decision-making slows because options feel pre-filtered by repeated internal phrasing rather than direct assessment. Creative range contracts as thought follows worn tracks instead of forming new connections. Long-term clarity erodes not through crisis but through constant low-grade occupation of awareness. Mental energy becomes harder to access because it is continually spent maintaining internal sameness. Over months and years, this unnoticed drain alters how reality is perceived, making life feel narrower without any obvious cause. When repetition becomes the default mental environment, it no longer feels like an activity being performed. The mind treats these internal loops as background truth rather than ongoing behavior. Because nothing overt signals damage awareness, rarely questions the cost of constant internal reuse. What drains clarity does not announce itself, and what weakens energy does not demand attention. The absence of disruption allows repetition to remain invisible while shaping perception day after day. What feels like normal thinking may simply be the mind circling familiar ground without realizing how much is quietly being lost.